These are stories whispered, too late to be saved. No names, no credits, just warnings. Fables that outlive their storytellers. This one belonged to a girl named Selene. She didn't come here to be remembered. She came to disappear. Imagine the place you ran to for safety was waiting for you. Not by chance, not by mercy, but because it was hungry. The storm didn't feel natural. It moved like it had a purpose, as if it was chasing something. That's where Selene found herself. Cold, alone, approaching a bridge no one remembered, near a tunnel no one was meant to enter. She hunched her shoulders against the cold, gripping the straps of her backpack so tight her fingers ached. The rain had turned to ice somewhere along the way, slicing at her like tiny razors. She tasted it. It was cold, metallic, seeping through the damp fabric of her bandana. Despite this, she kept moving. There was no point in stopping. Not when the cold was this brutal, and definitely not when she had left everything behind. She'd slipped out days ago, sometime after midnight, taking only what she needed. No note, no goodbye, just the sound of the door closing quietly behind her. Since then, everything had felt off. Time, distance, even her own thoughts. Things blurred together when you're running. Especially when you're leaving behind parents who wouldn't understand, or maybe just didn't care. The storm had chased her this far, drowning out her footsteps with its violent symphony. The road had vanished behind the sheets of freezing rain, leaving only a skeletal bridge, a hollow tunnel, and a choice she didn't want to make. For a moment, as she reached the tracks, she just stood there, lost in thought. No matter how far she ran, part of her knew they'd try to find her. Not out of love, not out of regret, but for revenge. For what she took, for what she knew. They wouldn't let that slide.
It is what it is. There's no turning back now.
She exhaled sharply, shifting the weight of her duffel bag and stepping forward. For a sickening second, she lost her footing, and her foot slipped slightly on a frozen rail. Most people would have screamed, but she didn't. She caught herself instead, barely. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the world tilted for a breath too long.
Jesus. Christ, that was close.
She stood still for a moment, bracing herself on shaky legs.
Slipping to my death on ice. Real badass, Selene.
Sometimes, sarcasm was the only thing standing between her and the full weight of panic.
Keep your shit together, girl. You're not dying on a fucking bridge. Not tonight, anyway.
She didn't look down. She didn't need to. The drop beneath her might as well have been bottomless. She didn't need to see the bottom to know she wouldn't have survived. Her eyes shifted to the tunnel just off to the side, nestled beneath a sloping edge of the bridge, like it had been carved into the earth and forgotten. It wasn't far, just a short drop down a gravel path, but it felt farther than it was, like space bent differently around it. The archway was jagged and uneven, as if something other than time had chewed through the concrete. It didn't face the tracks, not directly, but it was close enough to feel like it was watching. Shadows clung to his mouth, like a secret he refused to give up.
Be quiet.
The light from the storm barely touched it. Even from a distance, it felt off, like it wasn't just dark in there. It was empty. The kind of empty that made your skin crawl. Like your body knew something your brain hadn't caught up to yet. Selene's stomach tightened. It wasn't fear exactly. Not yet. But something colder. Something instinctive. Like a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispering,
Don't go in there. Don't go in there. Don't go in there.
Selene swallowed, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. Though it was creepy, no one would find her in there. And well, that was kind of the point. Suddenly, a sound. A low tremor, deep beneath her boots. Selene froze. The vibration slithered up her legs, thin and invasive, like something crawling beneath her skin. A presence felt before it was seen. She turned towards the tracks, squinting into the black horizon, where the storm had smeared out the stars. A light bloomed through the dark, small at first, just a flicker, like a dying ember. But it grew, stretching, expanding. Selene exhaled sharply and stepped back from the rail.
You've got to be shitting me. Out here, in this storm.
She scanned the tracks, judging the distance. She could make it. The train wasn't fast. Not yet. If she crossed now, she could be on the other side before we reached the bridge. However, her boot caught.
What?
Not hard. Not enough to fall. But just enough to yank her momentum sideways. She looked down. A piece of rebar, bent and half buried in the gravel, had snagged the strap of her duffel bag.
Are you fucking shitting me right now?
She dropped to her knee, yanking at the tangled strap, fingers stiff and clumsy from the cold. The harder she pulled, the tighter it caught. Her breath misted in short bursts, frantic now. Finally, she freed it. Just as the sound of the engine swelled like thunder behind her, she stood slowly, the weight of the realization heavier than the pack on her shoulder. The headlights were already slicing through the rain, searing the bridge in stuttering flashes. The skeletal structure trembled as the train reached it. The air split with the shriek of wheels against frozen rail. It hit her ears aggressively, sharp, vibrating straight into her skull. Her teeth clenched instinctively. There was no way to cross now. She backed away from the edge, eyes on the iron beast roaring past. Then came the boxcars, rusted, endless it seemed.
1, 2, 3.
She started counting. Maybe just to stay grounded. Maybe just to prove she was still here. Still sane.
4, 5, 6.
The cars rattled by with cracked and warped metal and rusted paint that looked as though it peeled off over time. Some were tagged with graffiti. Some were bare. But all of them looked used. Used in ways that only lovers of art could understand. Rain blurred her vision, stung her eyes. She blinked hard, wiped her face with her sleeve. But it was pointless.
7, 8, 9.
Her fingers flexed around the strap of her bag. Something had changed. Not with the train. Something in the air. It was colder now, but not from the storm. Selene turned her head slowly back toward the tunnel. She let out a long breath and scanned the bridge again. There was nowhere else to go. No overpass. No shelter. No broken down shack in sight. Her gaze drifted back to the tunnel. Still there. Still waiting. It hadn't moved, but it felt like it had. There was something about it. Something unnatural in its stillness. Like the air inside didn't belong to the same world as the one she stood in. But it was dry, and it was shelter, so what the hell, right? She rubbed her arms beneath her jacket. Teeth clenched so tight it made her jaw ache.
Alright. I guess I have no choice.
She glanced once more toward the train. Still moving. Still groaning. Still going.
Thing's longer than a fucking Mississippi.
Her voice was low. Almost numb now. Not angry. Not panicked. Just done. The tunnel didn't beckon. It didn't lure. It just waited. Like it knew she would come eventually. She adjusted her pack, boots crunching against the gravel as she turned toward it, slowly, reluctantly. Her hand instinctively went to her side, brushing the fabric near where the knife was stashed. The other hovered over the zipper of her bag, where the pistol lay tucked between a balled-up sweatshirt and a flashlight. The weight of it gave her comfort, a grim reminder of the night when everything changed. Her stepdad didn't work a real job. He was a drug dealer who cooked meth out of his garage, sold it to strangers with twitchy hands and dead eyes. He stashed weapons all over the house. A gun under the couch, a knife on the counter, always muttering about protection like someone was coming for him. Her mom had once been a trauma nurse, capable, sharp, respected. But that was before the pills. Before she started nodding off at the table every night, mouth slack, fingers twitching, her breath thick with something not quite alive. They used to pretend like they loved her, smiled in front of neighbors, held hands at parent-teacher conferences, talked about how tight they were as a family. But behind closed doors, there was screaming, fist pounding on countertops, doors slamming, someone storming out of the house and not coming back until morning with glazed eyes and shaky hands. And Selene, she was the one left to clean up the mess. She cleaned the house, washed the dishes, the floors, the laundry, tended to the yard. She cooked their dinners when they were too high or too hungover. She vacuumed while they were passed out either on the floor or on the couch. She nodded when they barked orders and learned to keep quiet when their moods shifted. Smiled when told, shut up when told, always available, never appreciated. Her bedroom really wasn't a bedroom, just four walls and a door with no lock. Her bed was nothing more than an old, torn mattress, dumped straight on the floor. Its corners yellowed, its center sunken and stained. No frame at all, no blankets most nights. No TV, no birthday candles. But always drugs and booze. Just try it, they'd say, sliding a bottle across the table. It'll take the edge off, sweetie, they whispered, lighting something she couldn't name. You need to loosen up, kid. She tried to push back, tried to resist, argued, spoke up, screamed. It made her regret it every single time. Then came the night her stepdad crossed the line. He stumbled into her room one night, drunk, high, or both. The stench hit her before he even spoke. Called her pretty, slurred it like it meant something. Then he sat on the edge of her mattress, his hand resting on her leg and sliding higher than needed. Selene didn't move, didn't breathe. She kept her eyes on him, steady, wide, dead calm. His fingers slipped beneath the waistband of her shorts, his other hand fumbling with the buckle of his belt. He didn't notice the kitchen knife under her pillow, didn't notice the way her fingers were already wrapped around his handle, tight and ready. She'd hidden it weeks ago, just in case. And well, this was the case. She was ready to kill him. She would have, but the drugs had caught up to him. Midway through tugging at her clothes, his body sagged, head dipping forward like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His weight slumped into her leg, then rolled off with a wet snore and dull thunk of his shoulder hitting the floor. The alcohol, the drugs, they did what she was about to. Stopped him cold in his tracks. She sat there for a long moment, breathing hard through her nose, the knife still tight in her grip. And her mom, she was still slumped at the kitchen table, mouth open, drooling into a pool of half-melted pills and flat orange soda, twitching gently in her sleep. Neither of them would wake anytime soon. Selene didn't hesitate. She moved through the house in silence, packed what she could. She took the knife, the gun, and made it as far as the front door before she stopped. In the kitchen, her mom was slumped over the table, head resting against her forearm, drooling across a ring of beer and crushed pills and orange soda. Beside her, 2 duffel bags, big ones. Selene's breath caught when she unzipped the first one. Cash, stacks of it, bundled, rubber banded, stained with fingerprints and something darker. She didn't need to guess where it came from. Drug money, probably blood money. She hesitated for maybe just a second, but then she looked at her mother, glassy-eyed and unconscious, completely detached from the wreck she'd helped create. Taking it wouldn't just buy Selene a way out. It would hit both of them back, where it hurt. With that thought in mind, she grinned, grabbed one of the duffel bags and slung it over her shoulder. The other she carried to the front yard, unzipped it, turned it upside down and dumped every last bill into the wet grass, watching them scatter like ashes in the breeze. Let them wonder. Let them panic. Let their business partners come looking. She figured whoever they were mixed up with would handle it their way. Selene didn't need to be there to see it. Knowing it was coming was enough. She thought about calling the cops as she slipped down the block, hands trembling inside her sleeve, eyes burning from wind and tears she refused to let fall. Thought about giving them one last payback, but no. Whatever they tangled themselves into, it would bury them deeper than any badge ever could. They'd built that life with their own hands. They could choke on it. And for the first time in a long time, Selene smiled, genuinely, and disappeared into the night. Now, however, presently, the cold bit at her face, snapping her back to the present. The storm had thinned, but her fingers were still numb, and her breath steamed in front of her like smoke. The tunnel loomed just ahead, swallowing light and sound, like it was alive. She swallowed, adjusting her grip on the strap.
Just one night, Selene. That's it. You got this. Just one night. And you can move on.
The tunnel gave no answer, but it still felt like it was listening. She adjusted her scarf once again and started toward the tunnel. That crooked, lightless mall carved beneath the bridge like a wound. She slipped her flashlight from the side pouch of her bag and flicked it on. Not just any flashlight. It was one of those adjustable tactical models, military grade, full metal casing, rubber grip, and a beam bright enough to blind someone at 20 feet. On max, it could light up an entire clearing like a floodlight. Her stepdad used to rant about it. Best thing I ever bought, he'd say, tapping it on the counter like a trophy. Whenever you're stashing cash or wait in the woods at 2 a.m., you need to see everything top to bottom. Pitch black doesn't forgive mistakes. You get me, kid? He'd always forget the part where flooding the darkness with light is like firing a flare gun straight into the sky and yelling, "Here I am, come get me." Stupid smart, she used to think. He had a knack for surviving things he was way too dumb to be involved in. Until now, anyway. Selene smirked to herself. A slow, private grin that never quite reached her eyes. She turned the flashlight dial, narrowing the beam, sweeping it across the jagged walls as she stepped into the dark. The beam stuttered slightly before casting its cone of cold light into the dark.
Well, here's to not dying in a goddamn sewer pipe.
Her voice echoed, farther than it should have. Too far, in fact. She moved slowly, each footfall deliberate. The walls on either side were damp and cracked. The texture of rot. Mildew bled from between the concrete seams. Shadows leaped and twitched every movement of her light. She didn't flinch, but she didn't like it either. The deeper she went, the more silence pressed in. Not just quiet, but absence. There were no rats. No distant city noise. Just nothing. Then the smell hit her. A thick, rancid punch of damp air, mildew and metal, and something else. Something rotten. She winced, tugging down her scarf to breathe easier. Immediate regret. The stink clawed at the inside of her nose, like wet meat left out for days, soaked in rain and blood.
Gross.
She pressed her sleeve to her face, gagging. She knew that smell. Death. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't ancient, but somewhere in between. Still here and lingering. She scanned the floor as she moved forward, cautiously, methodically. Debris littered the ground, discarded clothes, waterlogged backpacks, shoes that didn't match. A lot of stuff that belonged to a variety of people. Some were old, ripped, and moldy, but others looked fresh, as if only days old.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all.
She nudged a baby doll aside with her boot. Its eye was missing. The other one stared at her. She didn't break stride, however. But as her voice faded, she caught the faintest sound. A whisper of her own words bouncing back at her from the tonal walls. Not immediate, not clean, just slightly delayed. Like the tunnel had waited to respond. Selene paused mid-stride, raised an eyebrow, and
Hello? Hello? Hello?
the echoes came back, a bit off, each one a little more warped. She smirked, faintly, voice lowering to a murmur as she turned in place.
Creepy. But you're gonna have to try harder than that. You're not getting rid of me that easy.
She kept walking, but this time, she didn't say anything. Not out loud, anyway. A few feet deeper, she found a raised slab of concrete, jutting out just slightly from the wall, like it had been meant for something once. It was dry, as anything else down here could be, far enough back that the wind and rain didn't reach it. She crouched down and ran a gloved hand across it. No glass, no needles, no bones. Small victory, she thought. She dropped her duffel bag with a heavy thud, then slipped off the backpack from her shoulders. Her spine cracked slightly as she straightened up.
All right. Home sweet home. What'd I do for the night, I guess? Did I have to?
She pulled out a thick plastic sheet and spread it across the concrete, smoothing it out carefully with practiced hands. Then came the wool blankets, folded tight, layered thick, just enough to hold in body heat if she didn't move too much. It wasn't about comfort. For Selene, it was It was about survival. Something she had learned to cope with over the past few years, thanks to her parents. She then stepped back and gave her camp one last look before settling in.
Well, not bad, Selene. Not bad at all.
She muttered, nodding to herself with the smallest flicker of pride. The satisfaction was quiet, fleeting, but real. When the world gave you nothing, you learned to build comfort from the scraps. She sat down slowly, her flashlight resting beside her, beam aimed at the opposite wall. She kept her boots on. She always did, because, well, you never know, and caution is a necessity in her current situation. Better safe than sorry, she always thought. The silence settled again, heavy this time, unmoving, the kind that made you think about things you didn't want to remember. Selene didn't scare easy, not after everything she'd lived through, not after dealing with her parents. But down here, the darkness felt like it was watching her. She unzipped her duffel bag and dug around until her fingers found the metal canister tucked between a change of clothes and a roll of plastic wrap. A small bottle of grilled gray gas, half full, but just enough to help something catch. Setting it aside, she then stood and scanned the tunnel with narrow eyes, the flashlight being swept across the grim-caked walls and scattered remnants of whoever or whatever had come through here before. She spotted what looked like an old, mold-flecked backpack collapsed near the wall. A few weather-worn magazines, cardboard scraps, strips of torn clothing. All of it damp, but not soaked. Good enough, is what she thought. So, she collected what she could, wringing pieces out if needed, twisting fabric tight to squeeze out the rain and time. Then brought it all back to the raised concrete slab. She stacked a small bundle for the fire and laid the rest neatly to the side, ready to feed the flames later. Conservation was key. She opened the gas bottle, poured just enough over the first pile to help it take. Not too much, she thought. The smell could carry. From a side pocket in her backpack, she pulled a carton of matches, waterproof, worn, and almost empty. After striking one, she touched it to the pile and waited. The flame licked upward, struggling for a moment, then growing steady, casting long, twitching shadows that crawled up the walls like they were trying to climb out. Selene crouched by the fire, palms out, feeling the heat bite into her gloves. Her fingers throbbed, aching back to life after hours in the cold. And this time she let herself finally exhale. A long breath, slow, controlled, and steady. A feeling that's almost foreign to her now. It wasn't peace, not really, but it was something close. A stillness she hadn't felt in a long time. No fists slamming doors, no demands shouted down the hall, no waking up to cigarette smoke and snarling voices. Just firelight, silence, and her. In this tunnel, Sure, it wasn't a five-star hotel. It wasn't some oceanside balcony with a drink in her hand. But compared to the last few years, it was heaven. From her bag, she pulled a can of beans and a can of mixed veggies. She used the blade of her knife to pry the lid halfway open and letting them rest to the side beside the fire. Next came a granola bar, which she shoved into her jacket pocket for later. 2 bottles of water, some beef jerky, a few more cans buried at the bottom. It wasn't gourmet, but it was enough to last a while. She could have eaten like royalty if she wanted to. That duffel bag full of cash in her pack. It was heavier than anything else she carried, but it stayed zipped shut. Spending it meant questions. Questions meant attention. And attention that would lead straight back to them. Staying invisible was the goal. Off-grid, off the radar, and out of reach.
No gold-plated meals until I'm miles away from those bastards.
She gave the fire a long look, then reached out and added another strip of fabric to the flame. It flared slightly, just enough to hold the heat. Then she sat back, knees close to her chest, and her hand still close to her knife. When something shifted, she stopped moving. Her ears strained to listen. Her jaw clenched. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was as if the tunnel itself was listening. Then the sound came. Dozens of wet, barefoot footsteps, scattered, uneven, scampering across damp concrete, slippery, fast, almost playful, but wrong. It wasn't steady. It wasn't natural. Like a swarm of children trying to be quiet and failing. Her head snapped up, gaze slicing through the tunnel beyond the firelight. It wasn't the wind, definitely not the echo of the train. It was coming from deep inside the tunnel, where her flashlight beam wouldn't reach. Selene didn't speak right away. She just listened. The steps, they stuttered. Quick burst, then silence. Then again, closer. Finally.
Hello?
Selene spoke up. The word rang out flat and absorbed. The scattered footsteps stopped in their tracks. Selene stood slowly, grabbing her flashlight and switching it to full power. Her free hand closed around her knife.
If someone's in here and thinks creeping around in the dark is funny, don't. Listen, I'm not in the mood, alright? And I've got a knife. Doesn't care who you are.
No response. Just the phantom memory of feet slapping wet stone. Selene's flashlight flickered once. Her breath hitched. She held it. Nothing moved. But the silence felt thicker and heavier somehow. She slowly swept the beam side to side, the light cutting through the dust particles like smoke.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
She sat back down, next to the fire, keeping her eyes on the dark, The fire cracked. The warmth tried to comfort her. She stirred the beans and veggies together in the can with her knife tip, rotating it slightly to heat evenly. Her shoulders dropped slowly, half an inch. She reached beneath her blanket, pulled out the pistol, and checked the magazine. Full. Safety off. She set it beside her on the slab, then grabbed another strip of cloth and fed the fire.
Just one night.
She muttered.
Just one fucking night. And I'm gone.
She dug her spoon into the can and took a bite. Slow, deliberate, like chewing kept her rooted in reality. The heat helped a lot, but the taste was nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark, still watching, still listening. She didn't even blink. Moments later, she allowed herself to relax again. The fire's glow and satisfying warmth worked its way into her nerves, dulling the edges of paranoia. Selene sat with her legs stretched out, her jacket zipped to her throat, and the edge of her blanket pulled tight around her sides. She finished her beans in silence, savoring the heat more than the taste. Then, she reached into her duffel and pulled out a battered paperback, worn at the edges, the spine cracked, pages soft with fingerprints and time. It was a mystery novel, filled with twists, betrayals, and shadows in the alleyways. Comfort food for the brain, she thought. She flipped to her marked page and leaned back, letting the firelight flicker over the words. The story was familiar. Some grizzled detective chasing a killer, too clever to be caught. The kind of killer who always watched from just out of frame, but are never caught. The kind Selene could spot a mile away. She turned the page, dry humor curling at her lips.
Amateur. You'd be dead in 5 minutes out here.
The sound of her voice was oddly grounding. The fire popped beside her. A low gust of wind rattled past the tunnel's entrance, chasing loose gravel like bones dancing in the dark. For a while, the pages held her attention. The scent of the smoke kept her relaxed and calm. The occasional creak of damp concrete. All of it was almost peaceful. By the time she closed the book, a softness had crept into her muscles. She stared at the worn cover a moment, glanced at her surroundings in the dark and eerie tunnel, and then shook her head with a half-amused smile.
As if I need to be reading this shit right now. Especially considering my surroundings. Way to give yourself the fucking heebie-jeebies before going to sleep. Well, good job, Selene.
She tucked the book back into her bag and double-checked her perimeter. Fire, steady, gun beside her, knife tucked, duffel bag, full and zipped tight, flashlight, charged, functional, and lying next to her. She laid back, the fire's warm pulse licking at her boots. Her hand rested on the pistol beside her, fingers draped over the grip, like she was expecting someone to grab it from her. She let out a breath, slow and deep. Her body melted into the bedding. The ache in her legs dulled, and her pulse finally slowed. Her eyes burned from staring into the dark, but she didn't blink. She reached to her side and grabbed a bundle of scraps she had salvaged earlier and fed them into the flames. She layered it on heavy, enough to keep it going as she fell asleep. She scanned the tunnel again, once more. Still empty. She stayed that way for a while, knees bent, back stiff, every nerve wired. Her eyes wouldn't focus, and her breathing, as simple as it was, felt like work. She shifted positions, rolling her shoulders, popping her neck, and the silence just stretched on and seemed endless. Minutes passed. Her body sagged against the wall. She laid the flashlight in her lap this time and adjusted her grip on the pistol. For a moment, her eyelids drooped closed as she forced them open. A process that would repeat itself again and again. Her hand went limp around the pistol, but not too far. Her head tipped to the side. The shadows flickered around her, and her breathing slowed once again. Despite everything, Selene finally fell asleep. The fire flickered low. The faint drip of water echoed through the tunnel, and the darkness lay impossibly still. Moments later, something stirred in the dark, like a predator, waiting patiently for the opportune moment to approach its prey. The whispered voice was faint and fractured, almost like rust blowing in the wind. Another whisper came, slightly louder this time.
You're gonna have to try harder.
I'll do anything.
The tug at her arm was gentle at first, almost imperceptible. But as it grew stronger, her unconscious mind stirred, and her body instinctively resisted. Then came a pull at her leg, a bit rougher this time, dragging her across the uneven ground. Selene stirred in her sleep, brow furrowed, fingers flexed. The unknown creature lets out a slight chuckle due to enjoying Selene's vulnerable state.
Well, it feels to not have dying like a goddamn sugar pie.
A hand wrapped around her ankle, another around her wrist. She slid an inch toward the dark. The whispers circled her like breath, voice layering in static and saliva.
Not bad. Not bad.
Another pool. More aggressive this time.
What?
And her eyes snapped open. She launched for her pistol. A shriek tore through the tunnel, too jagged to be real. Selene scrambled to her feet, breath hitched and ragged. She ran toward the tunnel mouth, toward anything that wasn't this. As she sprinted past her blanket, her foot caught the edge of the pile she had set aside to burn for the flame. She tripped slightly, just enough to stumble, and in the chaos, a good chunk of the scrap heap tumbled into the fire. The fire surged, bursting upward in a column of startled flame, casting violent shadows across the tunnel. Behind her, the entity shrieked. It paused, but just for a moment, reeling from the sudden burst of light. Then it pressed forward, faster now, and angrier. The fire flickered behind her, shadows tearing across the walls like claws. Selene recovered just in time to snatch her flashlight. Her fingers clumsy with panic and kept running. However, the cold stone betrayed her. Her foot slipped. Everything went black and quiet. Selene stirred with a pain groan, body sluggish, head pounding like a drum in a crypt. Her cheek pressed against the icy floor, falling in faint clouds with every shaky breath. She blinked. Once. Twice. The world spun in lazy circles. Then she saw it. Her flashlight, lying on its side just a few feet away. Its beam was bright and still alive, casting a crooked cone of vibrant light down the tunnel. Not quite direct, but just enough to kiss the far wall and the floor. Selene dragged herself forward, slow, uneven, one elbow digging into the ground at a time. Then she stopped, frozen, her breath hitched in her throat. She hadn't noticed them until now. Hands, right in front of her, just a few feet away, in fact, closer than she would have ever allowed. Pale, bloated, twitching, splayed across the ground like spiders mid-crawl. Fingers jerked softly, skin blistered and ashen. One hand curled, flexing at the wrist as if sensing her body heat. They weren't moving. They were still, as if watching and waiting. A chill, not from the tunnel's code, but from something deeper, spread through her chest like ice. Noticing she was near the exit, her instincts kicked in, and she ran. Boots slamming against the ground, lungs dragging in cold air. She scrambled away from the massive limbs. Her instincts screamed for distance, for any illusion of safety. But then she noticed they weren't following her. She skidded to a halt, panting, heart pounding. The hands, they hadn't moved. The creature, or whatever it is, hadn't moved at all. Selene's breath trembled. Every nerve screamed for her to keep running. But then her gaze shifted back toward the bend in the tunnel, back to where her duffel lay, the blanket, the flashlight still casting that crooked cone of light on the cache. The only real shot she had at building a life that wasn't just survival. Running now, empty-handed, half dead, and broke, it wouldn't mean freedom. It would mean giving up everything she'd fought for. Every mile. Every scar. She clenched her jaw.
Shit.
She muttered under her breath. Then slowly, Selene turned back. Her steps cautious, eyes never leaving the unmoving mass of limbs. She crept towards the spot where she had fallen, toward the beam of light illuminating the tunnel floor. Selene didn't yet understand why it hadn't attacked again, but something in her gut whispered that she stepped on the edge of something powerful. As she inched forward, every footstep felt like a gamble, leaving her to question whether returning for the duffel bag was really worth the risk.
Mama said, let's cry. I'm not crying.
Selene's heart thundered. Her voice, when it came, was low. A squirm, barely above a whisper.
Not gonna scream. I'm not gonna scream. Not gonna scream, not gonna scream, not gonna scream. Not gonna scream.
Her eyes stayed locked on the limbs. She reached, slow and deliberate, inching toward the flashlight. Her fingers brushed the cold metal barrel. Then, she snatched it in one swift movement and raised it. The hands recoiled, instantly, violently. Like a child throwing a temper tantrum, the creature angrily flinched back, scrambling into the shadows with slippery, unnatural rhythm. The beam of Selene's flashlight trembled in her grip. She aimed it fully down the tunnel now. That's when she saw them. There, deeper in the bed, more hands. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Spilling from the cracks in the walls, crawling from the ceiling, stretching from beneath rusted pipes. But they weren't moving toward her. Not anymore. She narrowed her eyes. Something wasn't adding up. She replayed it in her head. She glanced at her flashlight and realized that when she was unconscious, it was on and pointing down towards the tunnel this entire time. The entire time she crawled, and the entire time she had been on the ground. The light pointed vaguely down the tunnel, but not directly at the things. But it was just enough light to see what had grabbed her, but not enough to drive them entirely back. It had been pointing down the tunnel, just not directly at them. That's why they hadn't backed off completely. They were close, however. Too close. But not crossing the threshold of her peripheral light.
Yeah, I bet you would. You bastards were watching me the whole time, huh?
Selene's attention drifted towards something behind the massive amounts of hands and limbs, toward the tunnel behind them. The fire, roaring now. A pillar of flame danced inside the chamber she had fled. fed by the debris she kicked into it by accident. Its light cast a long, flickering glare across the nearby walls and floor. And the hands, they crept toward her, but not through the fire. They avoided it, curved around it in fact, moving like insects, steering clear of poison. She glanced at the beam, then back to the shadows.
So it's not just the light, it's how it hits you. Time to be sure.
She flicked the beam slightly off center. They didn't move. She aimed it dead on, and they scattered. She tilted the light to the side, pulling it slightly off target. The beam swept just left of the cluster of arms, and the hands crept forward, fingers scraping stone, wrists cracking, movement returning, cautious but eager. She flicked it off, back on, and they advanced closer. Again, off, on, closer now, much closer. Her jaw clenched.
His direct light. You don't like being seen.
She turned her back and noticed that she was near the exit, and it was daylight out.
So the firelight, my flashlight, and being near the exit, near daylight, those are the reasons why I'm still alive and standing.
She steadied the beam and kept it fixed. The hands froze once more, and beyond them, she spotted it all. Her bag, the cash, her lifeline, sitting behind a wall of reaching limbs. She aimed the beam again, direct, unwavering. The hands slithered backward. Selene held still, pulse slowing just enough to think, enough to plan. And then a low, guttural chuckle, as if the creature itself was also planning, calculating, thinking. A thought had briefly crossed her mind as to whether or not the creature knew what she was planning. She questioned whether or not it knew that she would try an attempt to reclaim her luggage. And then, from the dark, worked, twisted, coated in amusement, her voice echoed back to her. It didn't need to say what it meant. The tone was enough. A coat of fear hit her, and her jaw clenched. Selene twisted the dial on her flashlight. Full blast. The creature shrieked and recoiled again. The beam surged, flooding the tunnel with harsh white light. Every crack and crevice snapped into stark relief. The entity's limbs recoiled like smoke against wind, retreating deeper into the bend of the tunnel. Cautiously, Selene took a step forward, then another. The hands continued to retreat with her. Slow and steady, she kept moving, like threading a needle between hell and worse. flashlight blinked. Once. Then again. Selene's eyes widened. She gave it a quick shake. The beam steadied and held on to whatever little life the battery had left.
Don't you dare fucking die on me. Not now. Please.
She picked up her pace, careful not to stumble again. Her boots scraped lightly against the stone. Every movement echoed. Finally, she reached her things. She dropped to her knees fast, keeping the flashlight in her grip a moment longer. Then, slowly, she laid it beside her, still angled down the tunnel, still shining directly into the dark. The hands lingered just at the beam's edge, waiting. Selene could feel it. The creature knew. Somehow, it knew the flashlight was dying. She stuffed her things into the bag with frantic, trembling hands. Every second borrowed, every blink of that light, a warning. The flashlight sputtered, its beam still fixed down the tunnel, still pinning the crawling mass in place, but just barely. However, the fire was still going. That warm, flickering light now filled the chamber behind her, casting deep shadows along the jagged walls. A small mercy. Until it wasn't. The hands, still masked at the tunnel's curve, paused. And then they moved. Not forward, but together. Dozens of them, rhythmically. And suddenly, a gust of wind erupted down the tunnel. Selene froze, heart skipping. The wind rushed past her, whirling with dust and filth, straight toward the fire. And the flames were snuffed out. Ash danced where warmth had been. Only the dying flashlight remained. Its beam flickered. The darkness around her shifted. Alive. Crawling. And in that terror-choked moment, her instincts boiled down to one thing. Escape. She glanced at the other bag, and without hesitation,
Screw it.
she yanked the bag money to her chest and ran. Her boots pounded the stone. She left the flashlight behind, still lying on the cold stone. Its beam fixed directly on the creature. Her boots slammed against the tunnel floor, echoing like war drums in the dark. Behind her, the flashlight sputtered, flickered, and then darkness. The entity charged, and the tunnel became a waking nightmare. Hands and arms crawled from cracks and seams, clawing at the stone. Bone collided with concrete. Rotting fingers reached hungrily into the dark, and over it all came her own voice, loud and deranged with laughter. She pushed harder, legs burning. The exit just out of reach, but close. The voice came from everywhere, above her, behind her, as if infecting the tunnel. Selene's boots slammed against the ground harder. breath ragged, lungs burning, but she didn't stop. A disembodied hand slapped down inches away from her heel. Another scraped the tunnel wall beside her, fingertips clawing, wanting. Her own panic thrown back at her, but now it sounded gleeful, mocking, as if it was enjoying the taste of her fear. Selene didn't look back. She couldn't. The sound grew sharper, layered, like dozens of Selenes were speaking all at once. Some whispered, some screamed. The tunnel narrowed ahead, the walls curved, squeezing her path tighter. But just beyond, she could see it. Daylight, freedom, but still too far. The final shout hit like a hammer, a psychic thunderclap. Selene nearly stumbled, nearly lost her footing, but she kept going. Her breath tore from her lungs. The bag of money pounded against her back, and ahead, the exit. A straight shot, open, freedom. Gray daylight bleeding through the misty storm. A dull, lifeless, overcast, but light all the same. Giving it all she got, Selene gritted her teeth and jumped. She launched herself toward the tunnel mouth, the exit, boots slipping on gravel as she dove headfirst into the dim light. Her chest slammed against the ground outside, and the air exploded from her lungs. She let out a breath, face buried in the cold, soaked earth, coughing hard, but relief never came. She stopped moving. A violent, sudden pull snapped her body back an inch. Then another, like something had hold of her. She looked down and saw them. Hands. 4, 6, 10 maybe. Gripping both her legs. Fingers locked tight and curling around her ankles, calves, and knees. Some pale, some waterlogged. Others cracked like old leather. Nails broken, skin peeling. All of them gripping her. All of them alive.
Please. Don't leave. Don't leave me down here.
Selene gasped, frozen in place, laying there, trembling, face pressed into the wet, cold earth, waiting for the final pull, the final drag, to snatch her back into the darkness. Her mind screamed for her to fight, to kick, to crawl, anything, but her body wouldn't move because she knew she wasn't free. For a long, breathless moment, she waited, every nerve coiled, waiting to be dragged back, pulled into the dark, and erased, forgotten. But it never came. The pull stopped, and for a moment, it felt as if the world held his breath. Selene stayed frozen, her lungs burning for air she forgot how to take. And nothing happened. No dragging, no voices, no return to the dark. Just stillness. But the hands were still there. She could feel them, wrapped around her legs like restraints made of bone and rot. Fingers curled tight, skin cold, cracked and unmoving. The hands weren't pulling, they weren't tightening, they weren't moving at all. Selene finally blinked, though her eyes were wide, vision blurred with panic and dirt. Her breath hitched, sharp and raw at her throat. The hands, they seemed limp, fingers twitching faintly, more reflex than intent, as if something had let go without really letting go. Selene turned her head slowly, terrified of what she'd see, and relief flooded her as she saw light. Gray sky above, cold daylight bleeding through thick, stormy clouds, pale and ghost-like. Snow drifting in lazy circles. The world, ugly, wet, and broken, but alive. She was outside. She had made it. The creature hadn't dragged her back because it couldn't. Selene stared at the soft light above her, like it was the first time she'd ever seen it. Her fingers curled in the dirt, grounding herself, and then, cautiously, she reached down to her leg. Her hand hovered over one of the gray cracked arms, clinging to her. She inhaled deeply and slowly peeled one of them off. It flopped to the ground like a dead thing. No resistance, no life. Slowly, she removed another, then another, each one falling like discarded rope. Dead weight, detached. She blinked fast, breath still shallow, arms trembling as she worked, until her legs were finally free. She lay there for another beat, afraid to believe it. Then slowly, she pushed herself upright. Her knees shook as she rose to her feet. Mud and gravel clung to her coat. She looked toward the tunnel and stopped cold. Eyes, dozens of them, glowing a haunting, sickly yellow, clustered like insects on meat. Some wide, others narrow, all of them fixed on her, watching, slowly receding. The creature pulled back, slow and deliberate. No sound, no warning. The sea of eyes shrank into the dark, vanishing into the endless black. But the arms remained, still reaching, twitching, still curled on the ground just feet in front of her. They lay there, dead and unmoving. Between her and the tunnel she had barely escaped left behind like broken tools, abandoned, useless. Selene didn't move, didn't breathe. She just stared. Every nerve lit up with warning, with disbelief. The voice came one last time, low, guttural, angry, fading with distance, but never truly gone.
Next time, you won't escape, won't escape, won't escape, won't escape, won't escape.
Selene didn't stay to find out. She turned and ran, leaving the bridge and its horrors behind. She just ran, across frost-covered gravel, away from the tunnel and its teeth. Her boots hammered the earth with uneven, frantic rhythm. Her breath came in sharp clouds, too fast, too shallow, barely enough to keep her upright. The bag of money thudded against her back with each stride, a bruising rhythm that matched the pulse in her skull. But her momentum couldn't last. The adrenaline that had carried her this far began to fade, drained by the cold, the trauma, the pain blooming just behind her eyes. Her pace slowed. The ground pitched under her feet, uneven and slick, with half-frozen mud. Her knees buckled slightly, and this time, she didn't fight it. She staggered to walk, head bowed, arms wrapped tightly around herself, each breath hitched in her throat, raw and rasping from the cold. The wind lashed her face, but she barely flinched. Her head was throbbing now, hot pain radiating from where she had slammed it against the tunnel floor. She could feel it swelling, pulsing behind her eyes. Every step sent another bolt of pain through her skull, down her spine, into her limbs. Her coat clung to her, soaked through. The wet had found its way to her bones, and now it was just her, shivering, aching, alive, and barely holding it together. But she kept moving, because if she stopped, she'd hear it again. That voice, her voice, screaming from the dark. And she wasn't sure she could take it. Not again. Time blurred. Minutes, hours, she couldn't tell. Eventually, through the icy curtain of snow and sleet, she saw something. A glow. Faint, flickering, but real. A number of barrels filled with flames. Figures moving by a fire. A cluster of tents pitched on the riverbank, tucked near a weather-worn outpost. Smoke drifted lazily upward, curling like a hand through the sky. Selene slowed her pace, panting, her legs weak and giving out. The people ahead looked normal, harmless, but still people. But something in her screamed caution. Screamed trust no one. Selene lingered on the edge of camp, hidden in shadow, hand lingering near her gun as a lifeline, just in case. Her gaze shifted back instinctively toward the direction she'd come from, toward the tunnel. She couldn't see it from here, but it lived behind her eyes. She looked down at her legs. The skin beneath her jeans still itched where those fingers had held her. Still felt the code. Then she thought about it. The tunnel. Those items she had seen scattered on the ground. Clothes, shoes, boots, bags. They weren't just trash or abandoned belongings. They had belonged to people. People like her. Desperate, alone, seeking shelter in the wrong place. Lost, running from something, and running straight into something unspeakable. Those hands she had seen, reaching, writhing, impossibly long. They hadn't always been part of the creature. Those hands once belonged to people like her. Those hands were once human. Those hands were his victims. That tunnel was the lair of something ancient and monstrous. Something that consumed the souls of his victims and left their humanity behind in pieces, scattered belongings, lifeless limbs. The tunnel was his den. Coming to this realization, Selene's lips parted, but no sound came out. She dropped her gaze to the ground. Her hands were shaking now, not from the code. She wasn't sure if it was fear or fury, but it was loud. She clenched her jaw. She had made it out, but it had her voice now, her words, her fear. And in the quiet corners of the wind, she swore she could still hear it echoing.
Next time, you won't escape, won't escape, won't escape, won't escape, won't escape, won't escape.
There's a kind of darkness you don't fight. You just outlast it. You don't conquer it. You can't. You crawl out of it with scars. And when you're able to, breathe. Deep beneath the bridge, in a tunnel where the light dares not linger, something waits. A darkness not overcome, but untouched, feeding on those who stray too long, too close. A den of despair, of lost souls, and endless hands reaching for escape that never comes. All it takes is one moment too long, and your hands might be the next to reach. Imagine that.